This is an event in the frame of the European Creative Europe project, WALC, Walking Arts and Local Communities. And we acknowledge the European Union for their kind support. The session tonight is part of the series of WALC Cafes and simultaneously a session within our journey that is called the Walking Arts and Local Community online course, exploring all aspects from walking arts, and now focusing in this June module of various sessions on walking in the digital age. So tonight we have the course participants, and also this session is open to all interested in this fascinating topic of where poetry, technology, and walking meet. Thank you, Bill, for being with us tonight. I have shared Bill's impressive biography in the chat. I would just like to add a few words as a co-poet. I have met Bill now 10 years ago, and I'm following his trajectory as a like-minded soul where poetry and space are blending with each other. Bill has brought poetry not only in the 3 dimensions, but 4 dimensions, and not only seeing it as an act of narrative, but also as a gesture, as a reaching out, as an act of bringing people closer to each other and to the body and the place we are all related to. Tonight, he will talk more about that, and I'm, as always, learning something new from Bill. He is, next to a poet as well, a curator mainly of the Primavera Festival, which is as well looking into the relation between movement, place, and artistic forms in a very interdisciplinary way in this beautiful place at the border of the sea, in a more than human aspect. So much to talk about tonight, and I'm happy now to let Bill talk, after which we have a conversation, talk all together. And for now, Bill, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerd. Hi all, thank you for being here today. Yeah, my name is Bill, and Bill Psarras. I'm an artist from Greece, and work as an assistant professor at the Department of Performing and Digital Arts at the University of the Peloponnese in Greece, Peloponnese. My field there is on the intersections of performance, installation, and digital arts. I can, I have a PDF to share. Let me. My talk today has this title of Topogestures. I will present some reflections on working, performance, and poetry and technology. As said, I'm an artist that explores poetics across different media and sites. My art practice is associated with aspects of the city and the walking and the wandering as metaphors, often for the human condition. And in a way, I'm trying to bring together the geopoetic and the technological through walking performances, through installations or of course other forms of distal art forms and poetry. The element of poetry, I'm trying to bring it as in a 3D way, as Gert said. My art practice is around this trialectic, let's say, of walking, of writing, and thinking, and I consider this as a methodological oscillation for me through these years. As we will see today, I have a few artworks that I will reflect. The body of my art practice lies on the fruited ways that processes like walking, writing, thinking, and drifting, of course, floating, and recently transmitting are performative actions themselves, which often articulate geopoetics across terrestrial and sea-oriented environments. To perform through walking means that the steps, the poses, the repetitive character of walking and the body create a score of experience and in a way compose gestures. In contemporary forms of performance, walking is not a distantiated, privileged action. Rather, it has taken all risks to bring the body at the epicenter of creation, at the center of creation, and to turn walking into an attentive writing upon the social and the technological body. So I consider walking as a temporal action, of course, a process of tuning the fleshy and the intellectual. The fleeting nature of walking can be aesthetic and has a sculptural utterance for me. It embodies poetics. And I think that it's in the richness of the next step, of the step, that renders walking a performative action. So considering the step as a unit of body balance, as a unit of movement, of time, of exploration, of presence and absence, of writing. Departing from this this mention of walking, writing, and thinking as a methodological oscillation, I would like to remind what method is, which sounds interesting. It comes, in the Greek language, method is methodos, and it comes from the meta, which means transcending, encompassing, in search of, and the odos, which means the street, the path, better, the way. And methodos means a transcending path, a way of doing, a movement, and a journey across a landscape of encounters and knowledge that illustrates the wider process of making. Therefore, a method in art practice is not just a set of rules, but the process, the journey itself, where everything takes shape. So let us think of the method, and then landscape walking and the path, and of course, the processes, the verbs, the processes of thinking, of doing, of making. So a landscape of thoughts, of ideas. Rebecca Solnit has explored these concepts of unpredictable encounters, walking as exploration, walking as a movement, walking as writing, and the path as a trace, but also as a new ground or as an archive. So departing from this this kind of etymology for method, I'm going to the idea of the city that has, for me, quite important. It's a quite important aspect of in many, probably all, of my artworks. Of course, the idea of the city and the concept of the city is interdisciplinary. It extends throughout centuries. But speaking of art, artists have regarded the city as a poetic database, as a foundational site of wandering, of performance, of reflection, of observation, and other things, but also of a site for metaphorical considerations. Fraser adds that the city, for example, is a hybrid form, half a thing and half an idea. I have gathered a few metaphors that artists and writers and sociologists and I guess all of them have mentioned throughout the decades, and as for example Lewis Mumford, that speaks about the cities as theaters and aesthetic symbols. Thrift calls them maelstroms of affect. Labyrinths, according to Benjamin, emotional landscapes, organisms, archipelagos, amniotic fluid, according to Carreri, mechanospheres, palimpsests. It's a known metaphor from architects, for example, interwoven fields, or even technological interfaces. I'm sure that the list of metaphors can extend. But let us think of the cities as dynamic compositions of local, of global, but also of the glocal, this kind of portmanteau stimuli. They entail vistas, processes, rhythms, practices, flows, networks, mobilities, surfaces, textures, sounds, smells, and of course they entail features, thresholds, exchanges, confrontations, atmospheres, dreams, and memories. And of course these, I'm sure that may remind you of Italo Calvino. It's a big influence, not only for me, but for many people, and the book of Invisible Cities. But then the idea of the city is much bigger, and yeah, when I'm going back to the last 10 or 12 years of maybe 15 years of my art practice, it shows that the idea of the city, not only as a space, not only as a public space, but as a concept that may highlight, may sketch, a kind of different aspects of the human condition, is central to my art practice. So this idea of the cities and the metaphors are central in my art practice and research, and it was central when I was doing my PhD back in 2011, at Goldsmiths, University of London, where I explored the idea of a kind of personal concept called hybrid flannery, hybrid flaneur, hybrid flaneurs, and I was exploring back then a lot the specific metaphors that came from authors like Benjamin, like Ingold, like Mary Schaffer, for example, from the Tuning of the World. Because I'm working also with metaphors in my art practice, but also in my writings or or yeah, in my way of thinking, even in the everyday life. So metaphor has this power of this power of this potential that you can understand sometimes, and you use metaphors to understand, to create a bridge. So metaphors were part of this PhD, and they are part of this. What you see now in this slide is a kind of gist, let's say, from that PhD, from that concept that I proposed, that was called hybrid Flannery. And I have a quote from this explaining what hybrid Flannery is. I was saying that hybrid Flannery has become a performative orchestrator nowadays of steps and technologies, of sensory and emotional encounters. It is this oscillation between the poetic and the socio-technological, the geographical, and of course the emotional, that shifts the meaning of Flannery and walking in the 21st century. Hybrid Flannery can also be described as a creative merging of the romanticized view of early Flannery, of the radical tactics and political implications of psychogeography, but also of the playful and performative elements that stem from Fluxus and Lantart, and all these elements seen through the lenses of embodied media, of social and geographical sensitivities in nowadays context. So back then, in order to understand that, this idea of hybrid in walking, of hybrid in flaneur, I was exploring these mainly these three metaphors. The first is the botanizing on the asphalt from Walter Benjamin. The idea, the metaphor of weaving from Desserteau. He mentions weaving and walking in his well-known chapter. And of course from Tim Ingold. And the third one was the metaphor of tuning. That stems from Murray Saffer in the Soundscape of the World, the Tuning of the World, the book. So I was using these metaphors in order to alter them, in order to update them, in order to suggest, in order to take these metaphorical lenses from them, from the previous decades and cities, and bring them in nowadays city of the 21st century, and see how such metaphors can still reverberate. The idea of flaneur probably was the first sign of aestheticization of the ephemeral and in the public space. And so we have these three metaphors, and the idea of botanizing on the asphalt, that sounds quite quite old for us now. If we bring such metaphor in nowadays, botanizing can link to further mobile processes of collecting, of documenting, researching, archiving, analyzing or observing constellations, images, sounds, histories. So in our nowadays context, I was exploring the idea of botanizing from Benjamin, but a kind of new botanizing on the urban data, on the emotion, for example, or on the material and immaterial aspects of the city. And the second one was the weaving process, the weaving metaphor. So the walking of the hybrid flaneur does not only weave spaces together, as Desserteau proposes, but can go further into a weaving of shared sensory and emotional encounters with other people, with co-workers, which has been also augmented through locative technologies in some cases. So such technological filter has made weaving process apparent both in physical and virtual layers. And the third one was the tuning, as said, and I was exploring the idea of a dynamic tuning on the move between bodies and the city. So the idea of the city now as an interface. And here I have a few case studies from artists that, yeah, I know you know. Yeah, so of course there are many more today, but back then I was working with specific exams, let's say, in my research, so that so the practices of Jeremy Wood, of Christian Nold, of Gordon Savicic, of Christina Kubis, Terry Webb, and others were case studies for me in order to reflect and see how these metaphors can be applied. In a few words, Jeremy Wood, in his well-known GPS drawing, the idea of GPS drawing, the practice, explores what does it mean to map and walk, map space through GPS. And he explores a kind of subjective cartography. Drew Hement taxonomized his practice as figurative, expressive, performative, of course, and GPS for him becomes a kind of cartographic tool if we compare it with, you know, the beginnings of what is called walking back then to Richard Long, and the earthly materials that used to create lines on the ground. The second case study is quite interesting. Christian Nold, I don't know if you know him, but he was probably one of the first, or probably the first, that combined the GPS technology and the GSR, the galvanic skin response, in order to create a device and work or walk with communities in order to map the emotional aspect of such communities within the public space. So he did several mappings, emotional mappings of across cities like San Francisco, like Paris, like London and Greenwich. Towards this mapping of subjective experiences, Christian Nold brought together a number of elements from computational biodata towards images and symbols that stemmed from while working with these groups of people after the walks, you know, in the city. So it's interesting, and it has this hybrid character because he combines, because he explored this kind of psychogeography in the city, but he merged in a way the objectivity of the recorded data through the GPS, through the biodata, with the subjective verbal expressions and stories of people that created a new kind of psychogeography. So here, for example, I have two notes. Here, for example, one can link what I mentioned in the previous slide, that we could find a new aspect of botanizing in his work, botanizing on the data, and of course, most importantly, botanizing on the collective emotion. And of course, his method here becomes hybrid because he combines many things from the Flannery, from psychogeography. He has this performative feeling of, and create this kind of create a kind of score, if we go back to Fluxus. So it's an interesting example. In the same way, Gordon Savicic is also was a quite helpful example for me back then in his work Constrained City, that was a digital performance in the city. And what he did was that he wore a metallic corset, but he was this kind of thing was augmented by GPS and Wi-Fi sensors that captured the electromagnetic waves. And at the end of the day, the artist walks into the city, drifts in the public space, while his this kind of metal prosthetic object responds real time to the invisible Wi-Fi signals and exerts pressure on his body and leaves marks on his body. So in a way, the score for him in his work was a kind of botanizing on the found networks of the city, on the found signals, their strength, and the pain experienced from this invisible list of Wi-Fi things and signals. And of course, here it's interesting to think of Benjamin's botanizing on the intangible, on the data cloud, on the ubiquitous cloud out in the city. So in his work, for example, again, the city becomes an interesting interface in order to, and the walk becomes a way of experience, a way of play with city. And of course, the Christina Kubi's electrical walks that she combined walking with co-workers, with groups, and sharing with them a series of sensitive headphones that were capable of making audible the electromagnetic fields of the city, of the surfaces of the city. In her practice, Kubis highlights a kind of hybrid flanèse I was exploring back then, that went botanizing in the electromagnetic radiation of the city, the tensions, the frequencies of the different cities, for example. So she created to me a kind of tactile psychogeography, because sometimes people were exploring with the headphones the city not just walking, but in a way of touching the bodies of the surfaces of the city. And this goes, my thought, to what the title says today, the topogesture. Topogesture was it's a kind of it sounds like a neologism, and but it stems from my personal practice all these years, and the past decade, situated within the creative convergences of walking, of performance, poetry, and technology. If we see topogesture in etymological terms, this is formulated as an oscillation between place, topos in Greek, and gesture, cheironomia in Greek, aiming to highlight the ways in which art practice can ascribe meaning to a location, and also to be ascribed with meaning by a location through performative, poetic, and technological practices. So topogesture is, in a way, is an action that does not merely occur within a place, but actively generates or ascribes meaning to it. It can be also articulated between some locations, sometimes breaking the remote and the local into dialogue, and thereby not only having spatial coordinates, but also coordinates of poetic meaning too. In attempting to delineate this personal concept through my practice, I have three core axes that I understand this through working performance, sight, and technology. But also I found myself approaching it via three processes, verbs, which I term forming, performing, and transforming. So these verbs show a methodological becoming inherent to the topogesture concept, moving from the form, the constitution of the form, in any artwork to its performance, to its sight performance, and then to a transformation, a production of a new meaning. So within this framework, digital media, digital technology acquires an ontological dimension. For example, in these works that I will share in a few minutes, I use working, of course, but I use Morse code. I use some light devices like lasers, GPS, and audiovisual media. But all these do not merely constitute transmission tools, but rather manifest the artwork itself as a technopoetic gesture within the public space. It's a progress. It's a concept in progress, of course, no? And I have some artworks from the past that, in a way, delineate this idea. This is called Walking Portraits, Performing Asphalts. I did it back in 2012 in London. It was a walking performance in 5 London stations that lasted 5 days. Yeah, a station per day. But I was walking for hours. And the idea here is that walking can be approached in repetition across stations and terminals in London, letting steps guided by ground patterns, by fissures, by, as you see, colored asphalts and patterns, and activated a ritual by considering them as found objects. So the process of performing asphalts became an embodied and conceptual device, which allowed me to stay on the in-between, suspended in a way, to be at the center of the world and yet to remain hidden from the world, as Baudelaire described about the Flannery concept back in the 19th century. So it was a performance that was documented by video and sound, but also from GPS. The final output, the performance lasted 5 days, but and of course, the experience was much bigger. But the final output was an audiovisual piece, experimental piece, that I combined the material from all these days and all these stations, that my camera was facing down, and was facing down because it was a way to insert myself in the city and in these kind of stations. Why stations? Because back then in my PhD years, I was exploring the concept of flaneur and walking, but I was trying to find connections with the field of emotional geographies, which is a field, a sub-genre of human geography, let's say. And the spaces that attracted me more was this idea of non-place, of the in-between, and that's why I was focusing on the terminals and entry and exit points. The final output was an audiovisual one, a rhythmic audiovisual one, resembling kind of the first how to say, the non-narrative films, the experimental films from the early 20th, back in the 20th century, from Hans Richter, for example. But I was facing down, and even these kind of simple concepts worked for me back then, because I was following lines, I was following patterns, I was following all these kind of micro topographies, and at the end it was a kind of a score for me. It was a kind of score to perform and to allow me to enter into the public space of London. Other outputs of these were a series of mappings of these GPS drawings, as you see, and it was literally I was performing this idea of botanizing from the Benjamin. So here we have these verbs, because I'm thinking through verbs, walking and performing. And then I did this work called Urban Halo, that I did it for the Visual Dialogues exhibition in Onassis Foundation in Stegi in Athens, dedicated at the Greek poet Kavafi, 2013/14, in Athens. And what I did here was, back then for me, was a turning point, because I started, I inserted the writing on my walking and performances. It was a performance between Greece and UK, between my town in Aegean Peloponnese and London. And what I did was that I started telling small sentences with my feet, I started seeing, again, most of the times the camera is, still faces down the thing, but I, not because I was shy, but because this frame, if we see as in cinematic terms, was a canvas back then for me. So I started here. I started finding again asphalt patterns and materials and soil, and started forming gestures with them. What you see as this kind of subtitles, is a kind of reflection that I had some thoughts when I was doing this, but it was inserted after the performance. When I was trying to create a walking In a way, these artworks stem from walking, but it's not only the walking itself, the camera showing me walking, but in a way, they conclude, they take a form in a kind of walking poetry, in a kind of walking / audiovisual poem. So this work here was a turning point for me, and then I did the same period I was doing this piece in Athens called The Motive Circle. Here I brought these processes of walking, of course, and writing. As you see, technology and digital media are active in every work, but they are not, they are not the center of the work. They document, they, in a way, they extend the poetics. Emotive Circle was a concept, was an artwork that I did for Rooms 2013, a group exhibition in Athens. And Athens that was, back then into the eye of the storm due to the crisis. I chose to work with another person, a native Athenian, let's say, and walk for hours forming a circle around the Lycabettus Mount, a hill, a mount at the center of Athens, that in a way weaves. Here is, how the weaving metaphor comes into this kind of work. In a way, this work tried to weave for, let's say, neighborhoods, for locations around the mount, from Exarchia to Kolonaki, Evangelismos, and Alexandras, and then at the end of the day, we managed to, to ascend to the hill and close that walk there. The walk lasted 8 to 10 hours. It was a non-stop walk, in a way. It was a non-stop. Documented via, video, 2 cameras, GPS, sound. But that was the first time for me. The important thing is that it was the first time for me to walk with another person, and the whole thing, the whole walk, ended as a 40 minutes reflective film, essay film, or how to say, and an installation using a thread to the walls in order to shape the shape of our walk, and a series of mappings that the first time I was experimenting with, as you see, with this kind of digital, of visual poetry. So I took this shape of our walk, the GPS trace, and use it again as a line to weave thoughts and images upon this. So, in order to summarize, these 3 artworks, as you see, show that my body, in a way, conducted various botanizings, in a way, across public space, for hours or days, capturing experience through audiovisual media and GPS. In particular, a performative body, intentionally in motion, which activated embodied landscapes that Creswell says that never finished or complete, not easily framed or read. Steps were the primal matter for these walks, providing a form in becoming, while following an inner score of found materialities across streets, as you saw, and in a way intervening and haptic in their nature. Steps and walking resemble a touching gesture here upon the ground and upon the body of the city, searching, palpating, or composing non-verbal poetics. These surfaces were considered as a ready-made score for such performative actions and poetic reflections across streets or stations, between entry and exit points, which were activated in numerous ways by the body. And this brings me to the second part of and the final part of my talk, that in this piece here, it's called Lightworks. Basically, it was the first time that I collaborated with Gert, and thank you, Gert, for this. It was part of the Autopias exhibition in Benaki in Greece, and I have some thoughts here. That was the first time, another turning point, that was the first time for me to do a live performance. I was doing live performances before because I'm still a musician, but not as a live performance, in front of, walking in front of people. Basically, I was walking in the city in front of people, but not intentionally with a crowd, with, this was a performance that, for the first time, I integrate an object. The object is a handmade and handheld light bulb that I used to turn it on and off while walking. So what was the performance? I was walking repeatedly for an hour or something around this square of the museum, writing with this white chalk poetic sentences upon the surfaces and fissures of the museum, this highlighted a silent gesture. I wasn't talking, contradictory within the hectic and noisy rhythms of the everyday. Walking through writing here and writing through walking. Non-verbal communication as a poetic process, walking slowly on the sidewalk, writing upon ground morphologies while activating this handheld light bulb. The body performed, the object performed, the city performed, both of us. Shifting contexts in walking, writing, and transmission revealed an aesthetic potential. Walking turned to a slow exploratory action, sharing the sidewalk with others, like a silent kind of ritual. But yet it stayed there as an action and set my body moving in a loop out of the everyday context. This repetition unlocked poetic qualities. Writing shifted from the page to the street and the public space. It took the form of fissures again, of cracks and materials, and then the written meaning performed it. Transmitting, in a way, light via handheld bulb shifted the object from its indoor night context to an outdoor action in the daylight. I activate light, it is there, real but dim. It is not acting as a reminder of presence, but it is present. The action was documented again through video. The sentences were there, and the light bulb was I let it at the end of the performance at the entrance of the museum. and someone smashed it. Anyway, but anyway, yeah. And then I have these 2-3 artworks that it's called, it's a series that's called Territorial Poetics. It was, here we have this dialogue between walking, performing, and writing. It was it was a performance, a walking performance that I did in my hometown, Egio. Basically, I was exploring. Yeah, I was part of this exhibition called Prima Rolia, and I incorporated half of a kilometer of this rolling paper, as you see, that I found in the industrial ruins of the paper factory in Egio. The paper factory in Egio was a quite significant one because it was founded back in 1924 or something, a century ago. And it is based at the coastline of the city. And the factory constitutes one of the largest factories, paper factories at the Southeast Europe, active from the 20th century, the 20s, since early 90s, because after a big earthquake that we had here in 1995, this was totally closed. So I found this paper there, and I use it as a found material, as a found object, in order to articulate a gesture. And I was doing this site-specific performance, unrolling it on the abandoned railway network in front of the city and the sea. What was found as a large compressed paper cylinder was later unrolled across the rails, a container of memory, of course, yet it was a blank surface open to the potential, forming a new ground upon the relics of past movement. Part of the form was also a personal poetic line here from my first poetry collection called Tundra, and the poetic monostic was in the name of atonement we reinscribe every day. Initiating from this poetic line, I chose this monostic as an internal score for me to be embodied and practiced. This, of course, draws to what Howell refers in his book about performance art, refers to words in performance as a kind of presence made of absence, as a kind of bridge between materiality and meaning, as objects made out of language. Unfolded here, unrolled, pushed by the walking body for hours. The performance lasted 5 hours without stop. This silent and haptic dialogue between the paper material and the railway stones revealed a primal matter and ephemeral landscape ready to be vanished. A landscape ready to be vanished. Here it was the first time that I used also drone filming. Drone filming. So I had a kind of visual score, a walking body. Okay, it was me. But then the first camera was doing a circle around the body. Let's imagine the body as a dot that extends and creates a line, to reminded of Klee and Kandinsky. And then the camera was doing this circle around me. And then the second camera was doing this kind of God's eye view, you know, this geometric frame of drone filming from the above, showing the body and the whole process in a more kind of objective way. So it was an artwork that for the first time the poetry becomes a score inside me, and I'm trying to perform that poetic line in a way. I'm using in this performance, I walk, I push, and I use stones from the abandoned railway network that they are called erma in Greek. I'm not sure, maybe they're called in English as well. Erma, which of course stems from Hermes, Mercury. And these are these kind of stones that they put in the railway in the railway lines in order to keep them connected. Another use of erma can be found in the ships. On the ships, you know, that they use. They say they describe it as ballast. I'm not sure if the water that the ship, you know, takes leaves in the next port and takes new water in order to keep its balance. And of course, I draw connections to the ancient concept of erma, of ermaic, not hills, but you know, little formations of stones that in ancient Greece or other parts of the world, they were using them to highlight the thresholds and the crossroads, to remind the walker of the boundaries of the city, for example. So I was using them as a tactile material in order to place them on this kind of paper. And this performance led me to another performance. As you see, I'm slowly moving from the city to the sea. On the next artwork, I went into the sea. This was Territorial Poetics 3. It was called Vanity. Here, the form of the gesture was an entanglement of stones, color, sight, and poetry. Stones and their formation to a small pile before, painted in gold color, were an in situ score at the liminal space of the coastline before the sea. Here, the poetic line is a new one, and it was taken from my second poetry collection. And the line was, all our weaknesses turned into arrogant poetries. And this line constitutes part of the form of the performative gesture. The action activated these lines through actual materials and metaphor of the vanity by piling and painting stones in gold color before the vastness of the sea. Through action, words became volume, and they formed a landscape, even a small one. In Greek, the word poesis is poetry. In Greek, the word eisi is vanity. So if you move the first letter of the word poesis, then you have vanity. So I was inspired by this play because the poem in the book in Greek has the poetry has the letter P in brackets. So you can read poesy, but also you can poetry, but also you can read ease. So all of our weaknesses, in a way, became poems in a way, but also arrogant poetries. What I did here is that I was walking and I was moving in this liminal side of the coast, and I was creating this pile, and then I started to paint the stones gold. The performance just ended sometime. I had no, I had no plan for painting a specific number of stones, but it lasted 3-4 hours. My intention was to make the poem, basically to make this poetic monostic a sculpture. Basically, it's not a sculpture, but anyway, you understand. It's a formation. It's an intervention. Then the next days that I visited again the site, I didn't find it there, but I was okay with this, even thinking that the sea somehow took some of the, of the stones, or some people, some workers just threw them, into the sea. It still echoes in me. It still works for me, even as a final, as a conclusion of this gesture. So here again, I have this kind of walking, performing, and writing, and then I'm going to this in order to end the presentation, and then as you see, this is hasn't to do with walking, of course, but it's my shift from walking and moving to other verbs, as said in the beginning, of drifting and floating or transmitting. And I was thinking that I had to mention them, even if it's not working, okay, but it's part of what I called, topogesture. This artwork here was the first one that I did in the sea, and the first one that I intentionally went into the sea using a boat to create a gesture, and was it brought in dialogue the processes of drifting, of performing, of writing. Objects. It was called Objects in Odysseys. The sea here, as you see, is the primal matter in my performance, but also the light element as well. The integration of sea in my performative action as a new ground of action, of creation, of understanding, of embodied poetics, draws to what Melody 2 has also suggested as milieu specificity, a concept that she proposes in her book, and proposes a conceptual displacement of thinking with the ocean. In other words, considering the sea as a disorientation device that can trigger hybrid and new ways of primitive action into and with the waters. Here I was exploring this idea of drifting, but in my mind, having a connection with the idea of drifting within the public space and the situationists and the city as archipelago. Again, we have metaphors here. But now in this work, I was literally in the sea. I was floating. I was using yeah, I was using movement into the sea, and what I did here is that where the poetic and the technological merge is that I took a poem from my second poetry book called Conjunctions, and divided into two boxes, placing into them two GPS devices. So I had literally a divided poem, drifting into the sea, and I was able to see and to capture the through the GPS the locations of these boxes. Here, what is interesting here is that the performance was exploring literally the idea of drifting, and in a way, the drifter here, the object, was the message. An along the way process with aesthetic meaning, open to poetic potential. So the intention to perform and to release the message, the poetic line, into the open system of the sea, marked an expanded performance made of different time scales, rhythms, human and non-human parameters. Poetic meaning, the drifter, literally the drifter here, was reinvented through its performative condition out in the sea, while the GPS trace made apparent what Parks called a plotting of the personal. I like this expression. While drifting was an action to shift the poetic meaning in fluid ways, the process of floating into the sea using a boat as a ground of action became a tactic to create a liminal space for poetic release or transmission in the next artwork, as you see. So here, so here the poem. I am inspired here by the wider context of media poetry, media poetics, new media poetics, from Edward Katz and many more, that suggest that poetry extended throughout 20th century through practices, audiovisual, visual, digital, computational, that extended in other forms. So what I was interested in this work was to leave the poetic line travel without being able to intervene, and to think how the poetic meaning was shifted, was altered by the journey inside the sea. The first phrase was found by a woman the next day, so the journey was just one day into the waters and then washed out in the sea, in the shore. The other part of the work was washed out in the sea, but in a quite remote place of the sea. That I was able to see its location through a custom-made website, but intentionally I didn't intervene for 1 year, almost 1 year, when I decided to, in a way, put a pause there somehow. And I was thinking how the movement of the sea, the wind, how the object that was stuck there, the meaning inside the object, how was performing this idea of the remote place. Because it's different to read it in the page, of course, and it's different to bring it into the real place. What was the potential? What was here the idea of kairos, the weather in English, but it's not. But I prefer also the kairos, which comes from the ancient Greek and means the proper time. The proper time. The proper time to do something. As you see here, it's not about walking, but it's not. But it's about drifting and performing with wider processes. And then the last one is a series of works. I'm still playing with this concept here. It was called Islet, and the last one was called Transmitter. These are two performances. The one, this here, called Islet, was again performed into the sea. That I used the boat to enter at the sundown, during at the end of the day, to enter into the middle of the sea, and use the boat as a transmission ground in order to transmit via torch towards the coast a poetic line coded in Morse code. So here, walking becomes floating in a way, becomes transmitting. And I was using the light element, torch, and the Morse code system as ephemeral means to write, to compose, to transmit from different and unstable grounds, boat and sea, or land towards the night sky. Intermittent in its nature, what appears and disappears highlights the form of such performative action via light and poetry within the sea or towards the night sky as bundles of laser energy, as you see in the next one. In such performative actions, form is the light. Form is the laser, the poetry, and all the particular qualities that such action activates through time. And this is the last that I did, the last one for today that I did before 2 years. It's called Transmitter, and here I'm not in the sea again. I'm back on the ground at the periphery of the city, using a laser and translate a poem from my first poetry book. You can see the poem here, yeah? Translate a poem into Morse code. Morse code means means durations of light, or durations of sound, or even durations of touch. Yeah, I use Morse code in order to transmit something to the night sky, and here the verbs and the processes are into dialogue are transmitting, performing, and writing. In a way, I was walking, but walking while performing the laser. I was doing small steps. So here I'm trying, in a way, to go back to walking and bring walking transmission as a kind of step equals a transmission signal. And I also did this as a, I'm not having this today, but I also did this as an intervention, as a workshop in Prespes last year. It was called the Transient Luminous Events, and I was doing, together with other people, of course, using lights. I was using the idea of Morse code and transmission and small steps, you know. So yeah, I have a few things here, but I guess that I mentioned them, and this is a kind of conclusion that in the first work of territorial poetics that you saw with the paper roll, the material nature of the trace became apparent through the transformation and degradation of paper, thereby inscribing it within the abandoned railway network. Conversely, in the object in Odysseus, in the sea, the semantic nature of the trace unfolded through the displacement or relocation of the poem, an act that alters the meaning of the poetic phrase, a process digitally mapped via GPS. The object functioned as a nomadic signifier, generated a nomadic signified, a geographically localized event of meaning. In the works of Eyelet and Transmitter, these two works with light and laser, affect an ontological transformation of the trace driven by the digital logic of Morse code encoding here. So here the poetry departs from the verbal realm and the page and is translated into a luminous event projected across the horizon or the atmosphere. Yes, in a way, again, I have the audiovisual, you know, as a way of capturing this experience and performances. But here, the logic, even in the eyelet or in the transmitter, so between floating or between walking in small steps and transmitting, is digital, because I use this, because the Morse code is, you know, this 0-1 logic, this presence and absence, this algorithm of transmitting something. And this functioned as a minimal unit of poetic energy, allow me traveling through space, basically through the atmosphere. I want to believe that the poem at the end of the day was a very small energy, you know, amount in the atmosphere. The approach, the performance is that it's not a poem that I just press the light of the torch or of the laser towards the sky, but it's the poem itself. That's the difference for me. The poem itself at these performances is light. Ephemeral, but it's light. Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry for the extra time here.
Thank you, Bill, for this. Actually, confirming what I actually called you, a poet that is not only working in 3 dimensions, but in 4, and actually time is a dimension you are really engaged in. Now, this were many layers of a very multidimensional, even more than 4-dimensional approach to poetry, walking, and technology. We are a bit over time, and I would propose to have like 2 questions. There are really interesting remarks, comments, feedback. Even people scrutinized your PhD while you were talking. So there's so much to talk about, and I think we have to extend this to another cafe, just dedicated to a dialogue conversation with you. But very briefly, maybe two questions for people that want to ask urgently Bill something they would like to clarify or no.
My question, which kind of is echoed a little bit by Anne de Forest maybe and Rita as well. I'm just really interested in the interplay between the intentional gesture of the artist, like the control that you have as an artist, and the lack of control that you have with all of the elements of the chance encounters and drifting, the landscape drifting, the unexpected elements that are, taking place. And beyond that, why do we as artists want those unexpected elements in our work?
Yeah, this. Thank you for the question. This probably brings me to the work of objects in Odysseus, because it was okay. It happened in the sea. It's not about direct walking, but it was the first time for me, due to the sea, to invite this random element inside, because it was in a way difficult for me to understand it. Although I thought the concept and started to implement it, it was difficult for me to understand and direct what does it mean to wait for the weather. That's why I mentioned the word cheiros, because I wasn't able to enter into the sea for 2 weeks due to the August in Greece is quite windy and sometimes, and so the gesture was waiting the proper day, to take the boat and enter into the sea. And it was well, it has the I mean it's this, I guess it has this randomness, but it's a safe randomness, to be honest. Why? Because you have the system. In this way, in this work of objects in Odysseus, not intentionally, but anyway, it was that period for me here. I did it on the Corinthian Gulf of Greece, which is a big, but in a way closed sea. So in a way, after a while, I was because all these are currents at the end of the day. I was waiting that probably the journey of these poetic lines will extend on the coast, on the ground. Maybe someone find this, maybe throw it on the on the rubbish. But I was it has this idea of creating a system, and that is the point that I want to make in connection with this text, a famous text by Jack Barnum back in early 70s, late 60s, called System Aesthetics, that he reflects back then, on the cybernetics, the idea of cybernetics, on the idea of what does it mean to create to understand the artwork as a system, not only as an object. And here, in a way, these poetic gestures, if I see the topo gesture that I mentioned, is a way to, is like creating a ratio. It's like creating a ratio of things. what you will insert into the experiment, into the artwork, but you don't know how it will end. Intentionally, I was inserting the lines, the GPS. Intentionally was I took the boat and went into the sea. But then I was facing the unknown, holding a trace from the GPS. So in a way, the GPS is a kind of using a technology in the way that I holded the lines back in London stations. The same, not fear, but the same, this unknown feeling of walking, of performing something in the public space of London, of a city like London. The way that lines became for me a method to insert myself, here the technology becomes a method to understand literally the vastness of the sea, literally the unknown out there, because it sounds quite romantic, but at the end of the day, it was a piece of material drifting, floating, and you didn't know what will end. And so, yeah, it was. I'm not staying at the technical part of the GPS. Oh, okay, a digital trace on a map. Okay, we have seen it the last 30 years, and that's okay. But I'm staying to what Parks says about the GPS as a plotting of the personal. A plotting.
A plotting, yes. Yes. Of the personal.
Yes. Plotting of the personal.
So it's a way of tracing yourself into this vast unknown universe.
In a way. Yeah, in a way.
No, it's just an interesting question for me, because I question it about myself, and as a psychogeographer, like, why do we welcome this uncertainty into our lives? Are we trying to tune into the universe? Are we trying to find the traces of other lives and gestures there? Are we trying to find some pattern or logic to the vast unknown? Anyway, I leave that. I think we're not going to answer that question now completely, but yeah, thank you. That was fascinating.
Thank you, Annemarie. And one more question. It is the duty of a poet to leave us with questions. So we'll leave it with one more.
Sorry, I just saw these comments and questions on the chat. How to answer them now? Can I take a screenshot and then write?
We will be happy to share with them. And thank you for being a Diogenes walking around with a light, bringing us poetry in the city. Bill.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you again, Bill, for this eloquent conversation and leaving us indeed with many questions. But I hope one day we will be able to answer them.
Thank you a lot for the invitation. Thank you. And we will have the chance to speak. We have a forthcoming symposium, so at the University of the Peloponnese in the autumn. So we will have the chance to,
we will talk a lot. Don't worry about it. Bye-bye, Bill. Thank you very much, man.